Is Matthew yet? Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, can we have the roll call, please? Okay, great.
Here.
Here.
Richard Gardner. Stacey Alvarez.
Here.
Justin Collier.
Here.
Jay Raines.
Here.
Matthew Seeds.
He says there's no audio from the room on the call.
Do we need to unmute this mic?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, got one?
I can't reach. I need a.
What are you gonna do it by telepathy or what? The dark side of
Yes.
the
Thank you.
Force. Can you hear us now?
Matthew Seeds.
Matthew,
Here.
thank you.
Renee Tillman.
Here.
Josiah Schmidt.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
All right, before we get started, I'm just going to mention a couple of things technology related. So there will be a slight delay for the folks on the phone. So when we speak, it'll be a few seconds before they may be able to hear us. So if there's a delay when they respond, that's why. If you're speaking, please speak into your mic so that the folks on the phone and who are streaming this can hear us. I think the recommendation was 4 to 6 inches from the mic, so just make sure you're speaking into your mic when you are speaking. The first item on the agenda is future of the library update. I mentioned this at our work session and at our last meeting that going forward, was that me or somebody else? We were going to have an agenda item for our meetings just to give a status update on where we are in our process and address anything that comes up in between our meetings. So this is the first meeting where we are addressing this agenda item. I think the first thing I'm going to do is let Jason speak to the memo that he put together for us on the financials.
Okay, thank you. And so you have a memo in your packet that is just kind of an overview, and I won't go through all of it, but it begins by really looking at our revenue and specifically property taxes, I think, so everyone is cognizant of our sources of revenue. We are 94% funded by property tax revenue. And looking at sort of everyone, all of the taxpayers' overall property tax pie, there is an example here, because there are so many different taxing jurisdictions within the county, everyone's tax bill is going to look a little bit different depending on what school district they're in, what ambulance district, what fire district, and so forth. But the pie chart you have in the memo is actually, I just picked an address from around here. So in St. Peter's, we are 2% of that tax bill. So, and that's going to be pretty typical for any incorporated area in the county. And then I did explain a little bit about tax abatements. As you know, we do file protests generally on tax abatements, but we are almost this is fiscal 23, we're at $595,000 worth of tax abatements. That's revenue that we lose every year to the various taxing districts that we're subject to tax abatements there. So in fiscal 23, Cedida, Ardene Prairie, O'Fallon, St. Charles, St. Peters, Weldon Spring, and Wentzville all had tax abatements that, as I said, collectively pulled $595,000 out of our revenue. And unlike many other taxing entities, we are, again, only funded by property taxes, so we don't get to see that made up for in increased sales taxes, for example, and that's one of the things that is often cited as a reason why these are good ideas, and they certainly can be for the growth of the community, but specifically as they affect the library, we see no real benefit from them, and they do take money out of our revenue. Do want to clarify, one of the things that we've heard a lot is sort of referring to the library as being in a bad financial position as a whole, and that's not the case. We, as of our fiscal 23 audit, our total net position was just over $54 million. That includes our capital assets, of course. So, and you can see the chart there from fiscal 19 to fiscal 23, it has gone up every year. What is at issue, though, is the cost of daily operations versus our revenue that we receive, and how the daily operations are escalating at a rate that is higher than the increases that we're seeing in revenue. So I explained a little bit, and I talked about this as well, but I'll just say it again. You know, our revenue, we have one source of revenue. It's like a household that gets a paycheck, and they can't have all of their day-to-day living expenses come out of that paycheck, or they certainly can't have it exceed. So if the mortgage and the groceries and the utility bills and so forth add up to more than they get from their paycheck, that obviously is not a sustainable position. Yes, even if they have some money saved to cover that difference, it will eventually run out. So, and then hopefully, if most household budgets, they're also putting money aside for future repairs on the home, the future down payment on the new car, and so forth, in addition to a rainy day fund. And that is sort of the equivalent of the library having to set money aside for capital reserves and operating reserves. So looking at this notion of our revenues not growing as quickly as our operating expenditures are, I really need to learn to put page numbers on things. 1, 2, 3, fourth page, you see a chart that goes back to fiscal 2000 up through fiscal 23, which was our last audited fiscal year, since we're still in fiscal 24. And grouped those in 4-year chunks. And you'll see that in 3 of those 6 4-year chunks, our expenditures increased at a rate that exceeded the growth of our revenue. Most specifically, or most obviously, you see that starting with the Great Recession in fiscal 08 to fiscal 11, revenues actually decreased by 1%, while operating expenditures increased 14% in that time. So, and then on the next page, you see just a year-by-year comparison. And again, it's that fiscal 9 and fiscal 10 that you saw the really significant switch. One thing that I do want to point out is if you look at our fiscal 24 budget, I want to remind everyone that we did have our largest location closed for half of the fiscal year. I know there's some stuff circulating about how our actuals for this fiscal year don't point to this same trend. Well, again, we had our biggest building closed for half the year. We have left positions vacant. If you look at Julie's financial report this month, you'll see that we're staffed at about 182 FTE, even though we're budgeted for about 210. So that's 28 full-time positions essentially that are left unfilled right now because we had that location closed, and that will continue while Mittendorf-Cordell is closed for the first half of fiscal 25. So I don't want anyone to think that's a permanent situation. That's a situation that we have a location closed, and it actually shows the impact of having a location closed and how it can really reduce expenditures. And then there are some cost savings. I wanted to outline the cost saving measures as well, just to see that, and some of these predate my arrival here in 2018. But this is actually not an all-inclusive list, but this just all of the various incremental steps we've taken to reduce expenditures, from benefit accrual rates for part-time staff to the floating collection to eliminate having to transport materials around the district, to various changes to the salary structure, reduction in FTE, reduction in management staff, and so forth. And I want to talk more specifically about some of those numbers, because it seems that even though I say these things, there seems to be some confusion, I think, out there when I talk about reduction in FTE and reduction in consolidation of management staff. So just to compare to fiscal 18 to what's in the fiscal 25 budget, we have reduced our overall FTE. In fiscal 18, it was 212.44 FTE. The fiscal 25 budget is 208.2 FTE. The way those divide between sort of public service and support service, in fiscal 18, the branch programming and outreach staff was 156 FTE, that's 74% of the total. The sort of support services side was 55.97 FTE, that's 26% of the total. In 25, they both were reduced overall, but the ratio stayed the same. The branch programming and outreach side is 153.13 FTE, that is again 74% of the total, and support services is 55.08 FTE, which is again 26% of that total. When I arrived here in fiscal 18, the executive staff numbered 6 people. It now numbers 4. The sort of second level administration staff numbered 5. It now numbers 4. So the administration has gone from 11 people to 8 people. Looking at management overall, there were 14 sort of management level positions. There are 16 now, but so total from executive staff, administrative staff, and managers have gone from 25 in fiscal 18 to 24 today. So, I mean, we've been doing everything we can to reduce those and consolidate. They look different, certainly. Titles are different, areas of responsibility are different, but in overall numbers, they have been reduced. So that's really all I wanted to say. I'm happy to answer questions. Stacy, did you have things to?
I do have a few things I was going to update everyone on, but before I do that, I want to ask if anyone has questions for Jason about the information in his memo or anything you'd like him to clarify.
I do.
Go ahead, buddy.
When you closed Spencer, because I wasn't here when that happened, did you lay off
No.
people? You just relocated them to the Mid-Rivers
No.
Mall?
Throughout the district.
Throughout the
So
district?
yes, some to Mid-Rivers, but they are actually worked
But then there
at
were
branches.
extra expenses to open that place, right? That building?
Really just
Not,
in
I mean, not
in
compared
rent.
to building a building or
Yeah.
buying a building. Because I was just trying to, because you had in here also, what is it, 60 to 65% of the current operating budget is salary and benefits.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we closed Spencer, we didn't save anything from salaries and benefits.
That's of the budget. So, I mean, those positions are all still budgeted.
Right.
Yes, we have saved. As I said, like there are 28 positions that have been left unfilled.
Well, I know, but when we closed it, we didn't lay anybody off.
No, we didn't, but we've been able to leave we haven't,
But that would have happened even if we left the building open?
no, we would have filled the positions then.
You would have filled them? Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, so the 25 budget
And they're filled-
assumes all vacancies in branches are remaining empty
And
or
they're
remaining vacant until January 1.
And they're not filled yet?
No.
Okay.
To what extent were these cost-saving measures at all the result of feedback from public-facing staff? To what extent are we asking our frontline staff, like, what kinds of cost-saving measures are actually going to work on the ground floor? What kinds of things do you need as staff? What kinds of things should we not be cutting? Basically, how are we including all of staff in these decisions that we're making?
I mean, so operational staff are asked about operational things, right? So if we're implementing something, it is incumbent on those managers to talk to the staff about what the best way to implement it is. In terms of looking at the overall budget and the overall big picture of the district, I mean, that is the purview of the people who, the board and the staff who have responsibility for the overall district.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any sort of permanent mechanism for getting feedback from frontline staff about what kinds of cost-saving measures would work for them? Or is it just kind of like,
What can you
managers
define would
listen?
work for them?
Well, I mean, so, some of these cost-saving measures might interfere with the ability of some public-facing staff to do their work.
Sure.
Maybe some of them.
I would say
don't.
every one of them would.
Yeah.
You don't do more with less, you do less with less. So every cost-saving measure affects the staff, and it reduces the number of services that we provide.
Right, and maybe our public-facing staff have some ideas for cost-saving measures that maybe we haven't tried. And so I'm just trying to get a sense of how we are gauging
We
feedback
have
from-
a staff suggestion form. Managers have staff meetings routinely. We have most of these were formulated with Library 25, which was a staff-driven, there were no administrators on that.
I guess I would throw it back to you, Josiah, and I'd like to hear from you why you think that setting the budget for the district should be the responsibility of anyone other than this board and our executive staff.
That's a great question. So obviously I agree that the board and the financial administration have the ultimate responsibility for setting the budget and for basically creating the system that people are operating in. But I guess because we as the board have been so insulated, at least in the couple years that I have been on the board, so insulated from our frontline staff, knowing what they need, knowing what's working for them, knowing what's not working for them, I would encourage us to try to think more creatively about how we can get unfiltered feedback from our frontline staff so that we actually know what's going on the ground, in the trenches, so that we can make better decisions about which things we should be doing to save costs.
And you think that is the responsibility of the board to interject in those matters as opposed to the executive staff that are hired to engage with the staff, manage the staff, and run the daily operations of the library?
I think the board's responsibility is to set the big picture guidance for executive staff. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would encourage us as the board to set a kind of big picture goal or objective for executive staff to try to think more creatively about how we can get, like I said, unfiltered feedback from our frontline staff about what's going to work for them and what's not going to work for them. I think that the public-facing staff who are actually working in the trenches know what's best for what's going to work in the actual branches. So the more feedback, the more information and knowledge that we can get from them, I think, the better.
I don't think I agree with your premise there, but I think I do agree that the board has responsibility to set the direction for the district, and then it is the responsibility of the executive staff and management staff to make sure that direction is implemented in the best way possible for the district. I think that's how efficient organizations are run. So I don't necessarily agree at all that we should be relying on frontline staff to set the direction for the library. I think it is our responsibility to do that. And while I think it's important that managers engage with their staff and hear from their staff, I certainly don't believe the board should be interfering in that relationship. I did want you, Jason, to speak a little bit up to something that we've been hearing in the feedback that we've been getting about why it is, if we're in such a strong financial position right now, and we do have a certain gap between our operating expenses and our revenue, why we feel like we need to proactively address the long-term financial sustainability for the district and why we're taking these steps now. I think a lot of the rationale for how we got here is getting lost a little bit, and so I think it's important for us to just keep reiterating why it is we're taking the steps we're taking now.
Yeah, you used the word proactive. I think it is I explained, that, if you see a gap between your income increases and your expenditure increases, it is incumbent to make, that is a marker that you have an unsustainable organization. Now, how long that situation can persist is how big the gap is, how much the difference is, and where in the starting point that you're starting from, right? So it could go on for years, as it has here, right? I mean, we can go back and look that this really started seriously in 2008, and it's something that we've been watching since 2008, and but it will end at some point, and we're nearing that point. So I think before it becomes a crisis, knowing full well that we have a whole lot, and this isn't something that I talked about here, but as I've been saying for a number of years, we are so far behind on infrastructure. I'll use the example that I've used a lot. There's two of them. One is we're the neighbor who has the fancy car and goes on the vacations and everything, but then you find out can't cover a $400 emergency expense, right? Because they're doing all the publicly facing stuff that everyone can see. There, in our case, we were open more hours than any other library in the area, yet our per capita revenue was far under theirs, right? So, and we were doing that by neglecting the behind the scenes stuff. We have residential plumbing fixtures in our buildings because the care wasn't taken when they were built. We have consumer grade electronics because they were always bought with the least expensive in mind. We weren't using major office components until 2016. We had a phone system that they could not get replacement parts for, and so on, and so on, and so on. So all of that stuff needed to be fixed. It has to be corrected. And the public doesn't see that stuff. But that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be fixed, because it's just sort of this shaky foundation that if we keep building on a shaky foundation, it's all going to fall apart. So that's looming out there as well, and we've been making great strides in that. But there's still more that needs to be done there as well. So, right.
So my
Yeah,
question
go
is,
ahead.
my question on that then is, I mean, why is there not a comprehensive plan? I mean, you talked about you came here in, 2018?
Mm-hmm.
That stuff should be in a comprehensive plan. Like you said, people put aside, don't clap, please, yet. No. Is you talk about people saving in their households. Well, the only time I've ever been able to save for my household, which is not very often, my wife will back that up, is when I set a fixed amount.
Right.
When I say, this is how much money I'm gonna put into this capital fund or savings fund every year. And I think that's just the thing that I guess, to me, is the thing that I see is missing, is that we have kind of I guess that's 6 or 7 years. Something breaks, let's fix it. We got extra money this year, revenue was higher, let's go ahead and recarpet and repaint a building. Where I'm saying, I talked about it in our budget meeting, that if we could calculate how much money, because you were saying a cycle is like 12 years to most things, or calculate that out and come up with a system, what we spent during those 12 years, divide that by the 12, and come up with an amount that we should set aside every year, then I think the public, or at least I would understand how much money we need. But the capital expenditures have been going, they're not the same every year. And we're taking money out of we don't really have other funds, I understand that. But I think that's the confusing part to me, is that there's no comprehensive capital plan funding set up. And that's why we're in this situation now, kind of, because we hadn't, and I don't know the reason, because I wasn't here. I don't know, maybe there was plenty of good reasons why that wasn't done, but it seems like that we're trying to talk to the public about trust us. When they feel like, I'm just saying that they feel like, well, show me a plan, and the only plan they saw was the quickly released to them and to me, quick release, let's close 3 library plan. Where if it would have been explained, like I said before, I mean, if it was proven to me that was the only way the libraries could stay open, you know, I could understand it, but it was more the process than the details, and I said that right from the beginning. So, you know, maybe one could do it, I don't know. But as of right now, at our budget meeting, when we saw the revenue was only, revenue went up 4.5%, and expenses only went up 0.7%, and I know, like you said, it's partly closed because of the closing of the library, I understand that. It's hard for me to see that it's an emergency, but if there is an emergency, why did it?
So, I mean,
Why did you let it happen?
well, I would say it's not an emergency yet. We are
Well,
trying to
closing
avoid
3
an emergency.
libraries
Well,
with
it is a
quickly-
it is
'cause
a
they were gonna
significant
close. They were going to be
change.
closed in 6 weeks.
Well,
By the time it's not,
I
that's
think
an emergency.
what I
Or
would
8 weeks, whatever.
would say to you is I agree that there hasn't been a formal board set policy on how capital improvements are going to be done over
I
X
think
number
until
of
that's
years.
done, we're wasting our time talking
But,
about doing
I mean, we
anything
did
else.
talk about this at our work session a little bit about taking steps towards that, but I also want to point out that it's not as if since 2018 or, well, I'll just speak back to 2018, there has been planning that has been done to take steps to try to put us in a better position. I mean, we had the facilities master plan done. We did strategic planning. I mean, so there has been steps taken, and a lot of that got put on the back burner when COVID happened.
Yep.
And then we saw the outcome of COVID with inflationary pressures on our budget. And so we are now at a point where we need to address the situation because there are things that we need to do for the district. Like, if we don't take steps now to address this, we will not be able to implement our salary structure.
Yeah,
So we
well,
will not be able to pay the library staff competitive wages.
Well,
So,
That might just have to be what happens.
I mean, at the
I
end
mean,
of the day,
if
I
it-
mean, yeah, if,
I mean, for temporarily, until we have a specific plan, I think, that answers the long-term capital gains, capital plan project, because that's the blame that we hear for anything that we have going on right now, is because our capital expenses.
well,
That's
and they're
what
not.
we're
That's
they're-
actually the
they're not
opposite.
related.
I'm only saying the operating expenses.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're taking money out of the general fund, because we only have one
No.
fund, and you're spending it on capital and leaving a deficit. Well, yeah, you are.
But what have been referring to and only referring to is the amount of money for day-to-day operations relative to revenue. So, no.
But it's always more. We always have more. The only
Right.
time we don't have more is when we spend it on a capital project. And that isn't budgeted on a regular amount where there's savings. I just think the public's not going to accept any single plan that we put forth with pay increases or anything until they see a plan to solve the capital projects.
Well, I mean, this segues into what I was going to say for updates. I was going to talk a little bit about what we discussed at our work session. And one of those things is the need for this board to have additional work sessions to talk about specific things related to our expenditures. So looking at our operating expenses, looking at our capital projects and what type of priorities we want to set forth, what kind of long-term plan we want to have for the district so that we can then decide upon what types of changes need to be made to the operating expenses. I mean, the overall financial health of the district is related to both our operating expenses and our capital expenses. But I know it's confusing for people, but the capital expenses don't have anything to do with the operating expenses. So when we're talking about changes we need to make to our day-to-day operations, it's so that we can do things that affect our daily operations, like pay our staff competitive wages. So I know it's difficult for people who don't work in this a lot to understand the difference between the capital and the operating, and we're trying to get more information out there to explain the difference and how they are related and how they're not related. But I agree with you, Buddy, that as the board, we do need to take steps to have things more clearly defined so that we can come up with a plan that will work and that will help us sustain our financial future. And you're right, we can't do that unless we address the capital side, because we have to have goals for capital improvements so that we know how much we have to put in our capital reserves, so that we know what that gap between our operating expenses and revenues needs to be. Yes.
So what is the reason that hasn't been done in 6 years?
I
mean, I just
honestly
don't know.
know.
Because, I mean, you talked about the person who has the nice car, the house, and then can't make the emergency payment. I mean, that's what it seems like we're doing. Something broke, and we have to take money that would have normally not been spent on capital projects. It would have been spent on operating.
I mean,
No.
I think
I-
we.
no one's saying that. I
Right,
don't.
When you don't have it dedicated to it, I mean, you budget it because you know you're getting more revenue, so you're gonna spend more on capital that year because you have
No.
extra revenue.
I mean, we did the
That's not true.
facilities master plan, and
Well,
we hadn't gotten to the point where we were taking that plan and prioritizing the recommendations from that plan. We just didn't get to that point. And,
Right.
I mean, we wanted to get to that point, and we're certainly going to be looking at that plan as we talk about prioritizing for our capital projects. But, I mean, we talked about this in the work session, and Jason spoke to it tonight. We have a pot of revenue that mostly comes from one source. It may change from year to year slightly. There aren't huge changes in it. Part of that is tax abatements and other changes that are made to the tax base. Part of it's the Hancock Amendment. So, I mean, so as I said, the work session, when we're looking at this and we're making a plan, we really need to focus on the operating side so that we can control those expenses so that we can meet the goals and priorities that we set forth on the capital side.
It's just that revenue's not going down.
But
I mean-
it's not
I
going
mean-
up at the same rate as our operating
Right.
expenses. So I think that is also
Well,
getting lost in
then we
translation.
can't afford to give everybody pay increases. We can't afford to do a lot of stuff. If the operating expenses are going up, I mean, every county government, there's no one hurting for money. I mean, look at my tax bill. No one's hurting.
I think the
If
thing.
you look at this, in 20 years, it went from 11.9 million to 23 to 23.5 million. I mean, it more than doubled in 20 years.
So, Buddy, I think we're actually saying the same thing because I agree with you.
Yes.
This is a spending problem, right? And I think
Right.
that's the point. You're
Right.
right. We cannot afford to give the pay increases and such
Not
if we have, I mean, that was the entire premise, is we were spread too thin. Too many outlets were built too quickly without a long-term plan. So that is exactly what we were trying to do,
But-
was to be able to sustain operations. I mean, that's exactly it, to reduce spending.
No, to
So
reduce,
I agree
to
with you.
decrease the rate of increase. We're not gonna decrease. We're never gonna spend less money than we did the year before. It's just not gonna happen.
Ah.
You can call it a cut all you want, but it's just a ditch, Roy. I just don't understand. I mean, if, who failed? I mean, who screwed this up? I mean, was it the people on the board for all these years that just, and you weren't giving them the right information? I mean, this isn't anything you didn't know 6 years ago, is it?
I don't think it's something anyone
I
didn't
mean-
know 12 years ago.
But why I'm just trying to think of why, it's just exasperating in a way that you knew what was going on,
Mhm.
and you waited 6 years, and your big cut was to just close 3 libraries and cut a bunch of people. So you could-
I just
so
want
you
to
could-
say again
so
that
you could
we.
raise the pay. To raise the pay of the ones you kept, you had to fire a bunch to raise the other pay.
Well, I think,
I mean,
Buddy, it's not that nothing was done. And I'm
Well,
I'm
nothing
gonna,
successful was done.
we were laying the groundwork to make some changes. And we are here now where we need to consider some proposals to bring our expenses down so that we can implement some changes that we have in the pipeline. If at the end of this planning process and the engagement and all the different things that we look at, the board decides, okay, we're not going to implement the salary structure, or we're not going to make this change, or we're not going to make that change. I mean, we've said we're taking a complete step back. We tabled the 17th proposal. We are now going to take another look and consider options. So I don't think it's productive to say that right at this moment we need to start blaming someone or finger pointing or scapegoating. I think we need to focus
trying to do
on
that.
finding a solution to our problem.
That's where I mean, if it sounds like I'm doing that, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find a solution, and I just think that I haven't seen any.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet. I mean, I think we had a proposal that, when we came into 2024, we gave Jason 2 primary goals. Find a way to implement the salary structure and find a way to implement the strategic plan. We got a proposal. We tabled it.
So does the board.
And we are going to say it again, we're taking a step back to look at other options. And I can't predict what's going to come out of that process. I do hope that one of the things that comes out of that process is that the board can set some clear priorities and direction for the district, that we can make some decisions about capital improvements going forward, so that as we go into budget cycles in the future, we have those priorities already defined. If nothing else comes out of that process, I think that would be very positive. But I think we're at the point now where we are going to be trying to find a better solution. And I don't know what that solution is going to be.
And how long, I mean, and that's what we're gonna be talking about
Yeah,
tonight, about how
we
long
are.
it'll take,
Yeah,
and how we're gonna transition
yeah.
to the new board. Well, I mean, we're gonna have
that's-
4 to 5 new board members in 6 to 7 weeks.
Well,
Up to.
that's,
I mean,
I mean,
we
that's-
could have up to that many new people in 6 weeks. So, I mean, we have to be ready to transition that. I mean, because with expired terms and people gonna expire, I mean, we don't know what the mayor and the county executive are gonna do.
well, that is true. But, I mean, all we
I
can
would
do at the
imagine that
moment
there's
is what
gonna
we can
probably be
do.
at least 4. I don't know. So, I mean, everything we do now, between now and then, is gonna be,
Well, I certainly don't think that's a reason for us to do nothing.
no, I know it's not the case, but I mean, have that in mind, that this is gonna be a work in progress, that is gonna take a while to get going. I don't expect everything, I really don't expect it to happen like a magic wand or anything like that, because it didn't happen that way. It didn't get into that situation that way, so, but, I mean, it is gonna be a very different, not different, but it'll be different. I mean, people have different ideas and different views, I guess. That's what these boards are supposed to be like, is to have people change over from different views in the society, that no one stays, for 12 years. No one has, I don't mean it that way. But it is kind of amazing that all these are gonna happen at once.
Does anyone
With all this going on. It's like,
else
what a time for.
have questions for Jason on his report? Just to give everyone a brief update on the engagement meetings that we're going to be holding. And we did talk about this at the work session. We've had conversations with staff and with the PR consultant about the logistics. We are working through schedules and different feedback mechanisms. We will be sharing more information with trustees about that. We are still moving forward with the game plan of starting those meetings in July. So we are working on that, and hopefully we will have more information to share about that soon. Does anyone have any questions about that specifically? Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the public comments. And I didn't mention this before, but we did put the future of the library update ahead of public comments so that everyone could hear those updates before public comments occurred, and we're going to continue to do that moving forward as long as that's on our agenda. So, just going to give everyone a reminder about how public comment works. We do allot 30 minutes for public comment. We hear first from speakers who are speaking about an item on our agenda. Each speaker is given 3 minutes, and the timer will be used, and it will start when you get to the microphone. We do ask that everyone who is present maintain order, civility, and decorum throughout the public comment, and for the rest of our meetings, we ask that you not disrupt the meeting in any way. Please do not engage in conduct that harasses, disrupts, or interferes with our ability to conduct our meeting this evening. We do have a lot of items on our agenda tonight, so we are trying to get through it as smoothly as possible. Please do not interrupt or interject while someone is at the microphone giving their public comment, even if you do not agree with what they are saying. The rules for public comment apply to everyone who is present, including employees, patrons, members of the public, and board members. People who do not follow the rules will be asked to leave the meeting. If you're asked to leave the meeting and do not comply, you will be removed. I may suspend the meeting at any time in the event of disruption or take a break if necessary. We're only going to take public comments during the designated comment portion of the meeting. You can only speak when you are called to speak, so I will call the name of the person whose turn it is to speak and also the next person. We do have a chair designated for you to sit in if you would like to before it's your turn to speak. Like I said, each commenter will be given 3 minutes to speak. Each commenter will be given 1 opportunity to speak. Like I said before, we will call first the people who are here to talk about an item on our agenda, and then if time permits, we will call the speakers who are here to speak about something that is not on our agenda tonight. So if you don't have the opportunity to speak today, you can submit your comments to the board in writing. As a general rule, we don't respond directly to commenters during their comment period. We may provide additional information to clear up any information or something like that if necessary, but as a general rule, we do not respond directly to commenters. All right, so we are going to get started. Our first speaker tonight is Brian Roida. After Brian is Jason Schroeder.
First, I'd like to thank everyone involved on your hard work, and I'd like to thank the library staff for preparing that summary of the library's current situation. I appreciate that level of detail, and one thing I'd like to harp on about that is the hours that have been reduced as part of these cost savings measures. I know that's been a bit of a sore spot with the community, and I don't want that to be forgotten. But what I've come here today for is to ask for more specific details on some of the things we've been discussing here. I know that's on the roadmap, but I think it would be good to have some more details going into these coming listening sessions. You've already heard hundreds of suggestions on where we can make cuts, but it's easy to say, for example, I'm willing to cut back on digital media to some degree. It'd be another thing to hear, hey, that means no more audiobooks. I have no idea where that line is. I have no idea what that cost savings is at this point. And it'd be good to talk about that a little bit. And personally, I'd kind of like to see the trustees work with the library to get a set of proposal packages that's sort of on the level of detail of that first proposal that we had. I want to see some of the trade-offs if we want to prioritize hours at existing branches or prioritize the expansion into Wentzville. I want to see those negatives, like the estimated impacts to wait times, even more reduced hours or reduction in events. Whatever trade-offs we're making, I think we need more information going into that. One suggestion I heard multiple times is that library could keep staff pay intentionally low. I vehemently disagree with that. These people are a cornerstone of our community. So we need to pay them well. That is our responsibility. Now, as we're going through, we're getting together plans for roughly a lesser version of the library. We're making trade-offs, reducing our services here. And when we're going through those, we're kind of assigning dollar values to everything. So at the end of that, you can look at all that. You can look at all those individual dollar values, and you can total them up to a big picture of a better library, a library that can keep its doors open, that can pay its staff well, that can expand into Wentzville, that can keep supplying us media that we desire, keep hosting these events that we desire. And at the end of that, you can come up with a tax rate that will supply that in a sustainable fashion. I would like to see that as part of these listening discussions. I would like to see, here's something that we could do, here's a dollar amount per year that people can pay to support this library to give us the level of service that we actually want. And coming out of these listening sessions, either way, you should have, one, the least bad version they can support under the current tax rate, two, a real feel from the community if that tax rate is supportable. And then if so, if that is the desire, the
Thank you,
marketing. Thank you.
Jason Schroeder. After Jason is Daniel Craig.
I've lost sleep in the last month, being kept awake by a phrase we all heard for the first time at the special meeting on May 17th. On the occasion I do catch some Z's, I hear it in my sleep. We even heard a version of it here tonight. Since 2008, our operating expenditures have outpaced our revenues. At face value, one could conclude we've been digging ourselves into a deeper and deeper hole for 16 straight years and are no longer able to pull ourselves out of it without some fast and massive changes. However, looking through the last 5 years' budget information available on the library's website, I couldn't find any data that backs up the claim. We ended 3 of these years with multi-million-dollar surpluses. But if the CEO keeps using this phrase as justification to close down branches and lay off frontline staff, there has to be some truth to it, right? Well, after many sleepless nights, I have found the rationale that allows the CEO to make this statement and technically not be lying. The facts are on page 5 of that Future of the Library document. So for this claim to be true, you have to take the revenues and operating expenditures from 2008, which is fiscal year 09, and compare them directly to fiscal year 23 for the operating expenditures to show they have been outpacing revenues over that entire time span. But it only works for fiscal years 09 and earlier. If you were to shorten this window and begin the comparison by even 1 year, starting in fiscal year 10, the comparison makes this claim false. That is why you'll never hear since 2009 our operating expenditures have outpaced revenues, or 2010, or any year more recent than 2008, because then the claim would be false. That's because the library has recovered since the Great Recession, and since that time, the library's operating expenditures have not outpaced the revenues. Over the last 5 completed fiscal years, our revenues have increased 16.5%, while operating expenditures have increased only 7%. Not only that, but our operating expenditures were actually lower than the year before in 3 of the last 4 fiscal years. Page 5 of the library, Future of the Library document has those stats for fiscal years 21 and 22, while the third year's numbers for fiscal year 24 can be found on the financial summary being presented by the CFO in a few minutes. The board received an email from me late Sunday night when I was losing sleep that showed where our revenue is in comparison to our operating expenses as of May 31st. This gap between the two figures hasn't been wider at any point in the last 20 years than it is right now, yet we can't give our employees an equitable wage. We can't keep all of our libraries open. Why not? Board, please ask questions and get answers. Ask about the stats from the special meeting showing us running close to a deficit. The CEO used old, inaccurate budget projections for that line graph to make his point. Ask about the total cost of implementing the salary structure change. It's only about 1/3 of what our projected surplus will be this year. Ask about unspent money in capital projects. It's more than 2/3 of the amount that's being asked for capital projects next year, yet that $3 million is going into the bank. Ask about the rate in which revenues and operating expenses increased over just the last 5 years. Hear through the corporate doublespeak about our finances and don't allow yourselves to be scared into thinking we're on the wrong path. Please ask questions and get answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Craig. After Daniel is Arnie Dienoff.
Thank you. After hearing Jason's discussion tonight stating that only about 25% of the FTE staff were not located in the branches, i.e. central services, I wanted to point out that central services receives over 56% of the budget for this current fiscal year and has over 55% of the expenditures based on the by location expenditures of the financials summary. This paints a very different picture of cost savings. I hope I have time to get to my review of the planned expenditures for the coming FY because it's fun. Why, also, in regards to not having seen this coming for the last 6 or 12 years, why do you have a CFO to point out your financial state if you're not going to review the financial statements? Also, I went through the Sunshine Law request process to receive the full results of the survey conducted in conjunction with the strategic plan. I was able to see that it paints a clear picture of what the public wants. More, not less. Not necessarily more of any one particular thing, though library spaces was one of them, but comment after comment about what more the library could do for the public stated more library hours. Do you want to know what the comments didn't include? Closing branches or laying off staff. Of the provided answers to a survey question, provided by the survey firm, the question was, do any of the factors listed below keep you from visiting the library or library building or website, end quote. Only one of the top 4 answers addressed the library itself and had nothing to do with closing branches. It dealt with the inconvenience of current library hours. There were also over 1,100 people who answered none to the things that the library could change. Though that did include another 190 comments from residents that talked about all of the different things that they saw as improvements that could be made to the library. And more staff, more branches to accommodate the public was what they wanted. I read through all 190 plus comments that were listed under the other option. Many talked about the need for more spaces, more resources, more staff. Some complained about the latest social issues or political talking points, etc., but 2 comments, which I will read verbatim, capture a lot of the public sentiment after the May 17th meeting. Quote, I don't visit because I don't feel the service is geared toward customers. Convenient, maybe, but I miss being greeted by name and miss the staff who I considered friends. The staff don't look happy, if you are lucky enough to see one. I don't like the self-checkout or being left on my own. I loved the community that used to exist at my library. It's a downer now. You must be saving a ton of money on not having staffing that used to exist. Hopefully all of these things you look like you want to add, you will have money to pay for. I have never voted down a tax increase in my life that benefits the community, but if you're asking for more money after taking away hours, staff, and customer services, you have a difficult road ahead.
Thank you, Daniel. Up next is Arnie Dienoff. Oh, sure, go ahead, Jason.
Hello? Hello? Okay, I do just want to clarify, because we've never pointed this out, that when you look at the budget, all of the collection is budgeted to central services. So, like, anything that serves the district as a whole. So all of the expenditures on materials, that's encompassed in that central services budget. That's why it looks like there's so much more.
And can you just clarify what else is in central services? So like IT, programming?
That would be a Julie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty much all the services that are provided district-wide are in the central services budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry about that, Arnie.
Good evening. Thank you very much, members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, County Public Advocate. The first issue I'd like to address on your agenda is item 5.6, Omni Systems Incorporated. You know, I was at the July 4th St. Charles City Council meeting, and I didn't see Jason Kuhl nor Julie Wolf appear to testify against these issuance of industrial revenue bonds. Now, they may have some aspect on our taxes, or they may not, but I've been to almost every meeting across our county when it comes to tax credits or use of Chapter 100 tax abatements for corporate welfare giveaways, and I've never once seen Jason Kuhl or Julie Wolf there testifying or meeting or negotiating with city leaders across our county. And that's really troublesome, especially since the millions of dollars that we're losing in tax revenues. Now, all of our revenues are setting records every year. We are a growing county. We have 433,000 residents, and we're growing each and every year. We have residential and commercial developments going online each and every month during this year, and we are doing nothing but growing. We have growth in this new revenue, which I told you 10 years ago to put in a special fund, but you didn't listen. And so let's put on our thinking caps. Let's get creative and let's dive into the facts. Let's get conservative. Cut all of Jason's consultant buddies, do in-house studies that we pay our staff a handsome salary. Cut 15% across the board with this year's 25 budget. As a matter of fact, since the 4 new trustees are going to be appointed the next month, let's put this fiscal year 25 budget on hold and let's table it. Cut Jason's salary by $30,000. You are the problem, Jason. Cut the unnecessary positions at the central office and positions that we do not need. Cut the billboards from last year that were on I-64 and I-70, Missouri Highway 94. We all know what our library is. We don't need to spend $3,000 to $4,000 per billboard per month. Cut the chief engagement officer who makes 6 figures. Cut the development director and development staff, in which we are barely breaking even from the donations that they derive and come up with. Cut the director of marketing position that you just hired another marketing director, because we already have a marketing specialist. Cut the newly created director of security position. We have a security contract in place. Cut the general counsel who charges us $400 an hour, who's sitting in yellow to the left of Jason, charges us $1 travel time from downtown St. Louis, charges us an hour travel time back to her home. Why don't we hire a St. Charles County attorney, not a St. Louis County attorney? Cut association fees down from saving us $80,000. You have 14 associations that you belong to in the budget, 9 Chamber of Commerces and community clubs.
Thank you,
Cut the
Arnie.
travel.
Thank you. Up next is Jim Zavradinos. I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Yeah, so we don't have billboards. Our chief engagement officer does not make 6 figures a year. I mean, there's so many inaccuracies in there. I don't even think it's worth it to respond to all of them. I don't know where those facts came from. Sure. Jim, thank you for waiting. After Jim is Paula Dawson.
I'm Jim Zavradinos. I live in Walden Spring. And when I first heard that it was considered to close the Kisker Road Library, my first thought was, this place is packed all the time. Why would you close the library that is so busy all the time? I'm there 2 to 3 times a month, and I've never seen the parking lot nearly, almost mostly full. Sometimes good thing I have a handicap sticker because I can park in the handicap space. With a huge, horrendous influx of apartments that are coming into our county, I see a huge revenue stream increasing there and a huge demand for library services. Closing these libraries will have a very drastic effect on all that. Thank you.
Thank you. Paula Dawson. After Paula is Karen Kohler.
I'm Paula Dawson. I live in Weldon Spring. I'd like the board to consider the disservice they would be doing to the residents of Weldon Spring. There are a lot of people living near that library who would have a very long distance to go to use library services if you close that library. It's good for the children. There's a park across the street. A lot of people go to the park, bring their kids over to the library. You got to figure out some way to keep the libraries open. It's not right.
Thank you. Karen Kohler. After Karen is Sharon Kumnick. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I've been in St. Peter's for 32 years. I raised my kids here. They all grew up going to the library. I have a granddaughter who goes to the library. We look forward to coming here every summer because they offer reading programs and other levels of activities for the kids, and it really impacted their life. I'd hate to see those communities like Deer Run, Kisker Road, and the McClay branch close with those same events allowed to those children. Additionally, as I'm becoming a senior citizen, I like going to the library, and I've always enjoyed reading books. And I think that would impact a lot of the seniors. A lot of them don't have transportation. A lot of them don't have access to the webs or e-books or electronic devices. And I saw a gentleman here recently at Spencer Road when I came in to see it as it had been, since it had been remodeled. And he brought out several DVDs, and I'm assuming that he doesn't have cable television. So he had something to rent, and he could rent them for free. My thought is that maybe we need to look at other fundraising activities, maybe going back to charging people to use those electronic devices, maybe $1 a rental. I don't know. I mean, I just think that we have to raise money and keep the money coming in so we can keep those branches open. They need to be, I did go over to Maclay when it was, when the Spencer Road Library was closed, and it does need a lot of work. It's an older branch, it does need work, but I think we need to just look at those libraries and think, how is it impacting our families and our children and our seniors? Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon Kumnick. Oh man, Jose, I'm sorry, I'm gonna mispronounce your last name again, but you're next.
Okay, good evening. I'm glad to have the opportunity to state my opinion. I came here tonight to say that I think you need to find another streaming service besides Libby. If their cost went from 10 books for the same price to 3 books, that seems unreasonable to me. I'd be looking elsewhere. But after sitting here, I can see that what I hear from the board is a lack of professional planning. You don't understand how to plan on a board. You're just not equipped. I mean, I've been there. You have to look at your assets. You have to see what their life is. You have to plan for their replacement. Those things have to be in capital funds. But I know that you have gone out and replaced things and painted things and put millions of dollars in buildings that doesn't seem like a rational plan. And I pay, my real estate taxes have gone up substantially. So there's no way that you haven't received tremendous amounts of increase from the property taxes here. Because I pay them. So I know you have the money. You just don't know how to spend it. You don't know how to budget it. And you don't know how to control certain people who have appetites for things we don't need. Because he has gone out and spent money on some libraries that was totally unnecessary. And how much work was really necessary in this building that it should have been closed for 6 months? I just don't see a level of professionalism here. I'm not hearing accounting words. Nothing comes out that seems like you understand the basics of accounting for a corporation, for planning for your asset counts and your depreciation and your income increases. You just aren't equipped. So I'm looking forward to the new board, because I will be here when that board sits.
Thank you. Jose. After Jose is David Hiscox.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Sarmiento Lardizabal, but most of you know me as Dale Ketter. The smarter people in this room have already mentioned most of what I wanted to say, so instead I'll tell you a personal story. I am going to tell you the story of how the library saved my life. So, full disclosure, since 2019, I have been the victim of stalking. Once upon a time, I was a fixture in the local gaming community. While I wasn't the best, I was decent and well-liked. One day, a group of troublemakers decided that they didn't want my melanin-rich face around them. They falsely accused me of being a predator, a groomer, a threat to women and children, and got me thrown out of my main hangout. They didn't stop there. They followed me around and got me thrown out of almost every gaming store in the area. They frequented my workplace and harassed me there too, tried to get me fired. And that's why to this day, I do not disclose where I work. Among the things I did to try and protect myself was to do some research at the library, specifically Catherine Linneman Library. Yes, this story is going to sound familiar. On that day, I walked up to a library worker who wore makeup and painted nails and asked them if they had any leads. Fast forward a few years later, I found out that a group of troublemakers were harassing a library worker, the same one I had serendipitously asked for help years ago. It was simultaneously horrifying and vindicating to see that I wasn't alone. I would later learn that we weren't the only ones who were targeted this way. There was a concerted effort to target undesirables in the area. If not for the library, I probably would have died by now, either by my hand or theirs. If not for the library, I would never have discovered that what I was going through wasn't unique to me. I didn't deserve it. We didn't deserve it. We were being deliberately targeted, and now that we knew what was happening, we could fight back. So please, keep our libraries open. The lives saved might be ones you care about. And bonus fact, while I was talking to the library workers I knew here about what I was going to talk to you about tonight, I received a message that I was no longer welcome at a certain place here in St. Louis because my stalkers had gotten to them. Apparently, this touch-averse asexual man is a sexual predator. Yes, you should all be afraid of me because apparently I have telekinesis and I can assault you that way. That is all. Take care.
Thank you. David Hiscox. After David is Larry Boschert.
So my name is David Hiscox. So first off, I want to say thank you to everybody that helped support the library. Myself and my kids, we love going to the library. So Kisker is actually the branch that we go to. I'll be honest, there's not a lot of people there when we go, which is why we like it. A little bit, actually support the original proposal to close branches. So as a taxpayer, I do expect people to be financially and fiscally responsible with my tax dollars. Okay, I hear people saying, hey, you know, we got to cut spending for staff, pay them less. That is the last thing that I want to do, okay? So if it means that we need to close branches, even the branch that I go to ensure that we have workers that are going to get a good wage, that are going to help support my kids when I actually go to the library, that is what I want, okay? Where I live, I can get to 3 branches in 10 minutes, okay? There are less Applebee's in the area than there are libraries, okay? So I hear a lot of people saying, hey, you know, this branch, I don't want it closed. It's my branch. It's around the corner. Guess what? All of us drive 15 to 20 minutes for everything out here in St. Charles County, okay? So there's Uber, okay? So here's the deal. When it comes down to it, okay, they have to make sure bills are paid, staff is paid an appropriate wage to make sure not only that, but in the future, the buildings are going to continue to run, okay? So I'm going to be very direct and honest. What I hear is the executive staff, very professional, outlining financials. Not only that, preparing for the future, okay? And I hear people making comments. I get it. It's your opinion, okay? But you don't know how to run a business. That is what this is. $54 million. It is a large corporation business. Okay, so I've also heard people complain, oh, you know, they make 6 figures. Guess what? They're running a $54 million business that impacts over, 400,000 residents? I'm going to be honest, they're actually probably underpaid. Okay, so end of the day, if that means we need to reduce locations and residents have to drive a little bit further, we're not saying close all the libraries. We're saying make an educated decision financially to branches that are being underutilized to reallocate and ensure that their community is served in other branches. It's not a big deal, okay? End of the day, as a taxpayer, okay, I've heard people say, oh, raise taxes, raise taxes. Guess what, okay? The way the economy is going, okay, we're going to have people making $20, $30, $40 an hour in the next probably 10 years, okay? So how are we going to afford that? We need to start making adjustments now. And that is what the executive group actually proposed.
Thank you, David. I would also remind the audience to please be respectful while people are providing their public comment and not be interjecting with comments or jeers or other noises, please. Larry Boschert. How are we on time?
Good evening. I'm Larry Boschert. I was in a good mood when I came out here. I'm not anymore. The last meeting that I went to, it was blamed, the problems were blamed on salaries and people had to be laid off. And e-books and streaming videos. My thought about the e-books and streaming videos was if we can't afford them, they've raised them 430% or whatever it was that I read in the paper and I heard at the meeting. If you can't afford to shop at Tiffany's, then don't shop at Tiffany's. If we can't afford 430% increase, I don't know anything about the library business whatsoever, but I do know you can't buy stuff that you can't afford. Maybe you can if you're a library board. I don't think anybody else can, and probably none of you can as individuals. And I didn't even know, I still am not sure who runs the show. The Board of Trustees or the staff here or the county commissioner or the mayor of St. Charles or whoever. I can't figure it out from what I've read or seen on TV or who is in charge, but apparently nobody is. And I'm not saying that for laughs. I'm saying it for shame. This issue of wages, if anybody in St. Charles County that works for any branch of the St. Charles County is not getting paid a comparative, competitive, and livable wage, then that is a shame. St. Charles County has to be ashamed because we are not a low-class or even close to low-class county that can't take care of our employees and sustain them with their families, with jobs. So I don't see where that's an issue, and I'm really, tonight, I put that up at the top over here on the right side because I thought, I don't believe there's anybody in this room doesn't believe that people should be paid a livable wage that's working for St. Charles County. The other thing I'm picking up on, and I know it's the last man was talking about it, or two people, that Kisker wasn't mentioned. I'm closest to Kisker, not Kisker. I'm closest to Maclay. Maclay isn't being saved here tonight. I go between Maclay and Kisker. They're both wonderful libraries. They're far beyond what I saw as a kid, and I don't see anything wrong with them. I think the carpet and the walls and everything looks as good as this place does. It's just been remodeled. So I don't know what anybody's talking about. I didn't think this place needed whatever was done downstairs. It's nice new carpets and things, but it looked pretty good to me before it was remodeled. So what I'm hearing is...
Thank you, Larry. Your time is up.
Can I... that we're going to close up 3 out of the 13 libraries. I would like to propose that we set up a lottery with envelopes, each one containing one of the names of the 13 libraries, including this one and Catherine Linneman, and we'll get one of our trusted clergy from St. Charles County to pick out 10 envelopes. Those are the 10 that we'll keep open, and the other trees will be just out of luck. And I think that would be fair. We could all agree to that.
Thank you,
Thank
Larry.
you.
And that concludes our public comment. If you didn't have an opportunity to speak, you may submit your comments in writing to the board. Sorry about that. I am hearing some feedback. I'm not sure. Oh, I don't know if it's something with or the other microphones or whatever, but I was hearing that. Can everyone on the phone confirm that they can still hear us pretty well?
Yep. Yes.
Well, right.
No, I can't hear you.
All right, so we are going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is our reports and correspondence. The first report is the Chief Financial Officer's report.
So with our conclusion of May, we've covered a number of the variances in the revenue section. As far as the summary report, we're really strong in our tax revenues. That includes both the current and the prior year taxes in that line, in case you don't know that. As far as the state aid and grants, we are over primarily due to the state aid that we did not budget for initially. And then we've got the emergency connectivity fund. So you have excess revenue, as well as when you look at the technology and telecommunication expense line, that is the over budget condition in that, or close to it. Other areas we've already discussed as far as the salaries, pretty much being under budget according to the FTE level that we're at. As far as other operations, we are under budget as far as our supplies, buildings, programming, some of our equipment, marketing, and professional fees currently. We will see additional expenses in June, so those are being reviewed currently. And capital, we have a number of capital items that are actually rolling over to fiscal 25. So that's the under budget condition in the capital project line. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have questions for Julie? Hey, Julie, can you remind us,
Certainly.
state aid and grants, why the year-to-date is so much over what we were expecting?
So, sorry, let me pull the summary. So as far as the state aid and grants line, the Missouri state aid and A&E income was about $444,000. So that was not budgeted for, but we did receive that. And then the other piece is the emergency connectivity fund. That's the federal grant funding for hotspots. So that's reflected in both the state aid and grant line and the technology line and the expenses.
And those two items are for specific uses, and are they recurring sources of revenue that we expect to receive going forward, or was it a one-time infusion?
As far as the Missouri state aid and the A&E, the income tax? So the emergency connectivity fund actually concludes June 30th.
Yep.
So the federal government's not continuing that.
Yep.
As far as state aid, that is something that is in the state's budget each year. But again, they look at other state revenues, and they do look at this area to cut if they don't have enough funding. At the time in fiscal 24 that we budgeted it, there were issues. So it is recurring, and it's used primarily for our collections.
Okay. All right, if no one has any other questions for Julie, we will move on to our next report, which is the Chief Communication and Engagement Officer's report.
Good evening. In the interest of time, I'll let you guys read the two marketing pieces, but I would like to let Jennifer Compton, our foundation director, talk about a few things that are going on in the fundraising side of things.
Can everyone hear me? The Library Foundation has had a long-standing partnership with the BJC Healthcare, St. Peter's, and Progress West Hospitals. They support the foundation in several ways throughout the year. In May, the Library Foundation was granted $5,000 to help fund the Born to Read kits, providing babies and new mothers with their first board book, insulated carrier, and access to their first library card. We would like you to also save the date for a number of events that are coming up. Our last fundraiser of the fiscal year is our puzzle contest that is being held on June 29th. Here in this room, the Commons, it's at the Spencer Road branch. We have two sessions. The first AM session is a 500-piece puzzle, and the PM session is a 1,000-piece puzzle. Secondly, our Friends of the Library Book Fair is being held August 2nd through the 4th. Friday, the Friends membership customers only have their access time from 9 a.m. to noon. So if you don't have a Friends membership and you want to get the first chance at seeing the books, make sure you get online and apply for your membership. And soon the volunteers email will go out next week to recruit over 700 volunteers for the book fair. And then lastly, our 10th Imagine Gala will be happening October 12th at the Mirastar Casino. That is our biggest fundraiser of the year. Celebrating our 25th anniversary, we are thrilled to have our chair as the former executive director of the Library Foundation, Kristen Williams. And on a little fun note, our theme is Sherlock Holmes this year.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions?
Any questions on the communication engagement report?
What is the date for that again? It's not on here.
The date for the gala?
October 12th.
October 12th.
And it's at the casino?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Up next is the Chief Administrative Officer's report.
I would go ahead and encourage you to read the report. There's a lot of things that have gone on in May, a lot of exciting things, and some other ones that are coming up this month. But I do want to pass the mic over to Asia to talk about Spencer. Since we're in Spencer, it's been renovated and we're back in it. I would love for her to share some stories on what's been going on.
I'm going to try and cut down on IT's headache and just use this mic and say so. So everything is going well. We are still working through kinks, so everything is still a bit of a work in progress downstairs, but we have gotten some positive feedback. Everyone seems to like the new flow. The new desk is working out well. I think it's nice to have somebody right there when they walk in the door and to greet people and to help them right away. We've been having lots and lots of kids and families. It's almost impossible actually to reshelve children's books at this point because of the vast amount of children in the area. We had 75 kids in story time at one point, which is a lot of kids in one room on a hot day. And I have almost doubled our toddler tunes participants with 30 to 40 kids in there. We have had, some people do miss the ball though, so I have to admit that is a sad feature for some people, but we have had a lot of people come in and compliment us, so, and the staff are quite happy to be back in the building and seeing a lot of our regulars back too, so, yeah. And I hope everyone gets a chance to go downstairs, so, or did get a chance, so.
Great. Anything else? Any questions on the Chief Administrative Officer's report?
Hi.
Go ahead, Josiah.
Thanks. So since our last regular meeting a month ago, have you and your staff been able to give any thought to ways that we can increase multi-directional communication between employees, between departments, ways to drive out fear from the organization, ways to incorporate thoughts and ideas and suggestions from public-facing staff? Any progress on brainstorming solutions on that front?
I would say not necessarily, because that has not been a priority at the moment, because we're working on getting people back in branches and shifting staff with renovations. And quite honestly, there have been a lot of HR issues that have had to take most of our focus. But we do have a meeting coming up with our leadership teams, which includes branch managers, the regional managers, directors, exec team, to sit and listen and find out what's going on and to start talking about next steps and how we move forward. So that's our plan at the moment.
It's been a crazy month, I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge your guys' hard work. Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Up next is the Chief Executive Officer's report.
I think I will be brief as well. Asia talked about the work here. I do just want to give a shout out to everyone involved with getting this branch reopened. I mean, it really was a team effort, so thank you, everyone. So Mittendorf Cradell is now being prepared for the construction to start, and that is also a team effort. It's a much more extensive renovation, so it will take a lot more, it is going to take, and is taking a lot more coordination. So just a shout out to everyone involved with that as well. Can I answer any questions?
Questions for Jason on his report? Jason, can you remind us when the construction's actually going to begin at Middendorf?
I could if I knew. And when are they moving the shelves? So June 28th, a lot of the shelves are being moved, and then it will be shortly after that.
Okay. All right, up next is the statistical report.
Yeah, really the only thing I wanted to highlight here is, again, if you look at the year-to-date use comparison, you see that we are up over last year despite having this building closed for 6 months. So I think that's a great sign, and we know that our customers were finding us elsewhere. And you can see kind of the impact of that down below at some of the branches that saw spikes this year. So, answer any questions?
Any questions on the statistical report? All right. Up next on the agenda is correspondence. We have a letter from the City of St. Charles about Omni Systems. This is a follow-up to a letter we had received previously, I do believe, and we submitted our written objection to this, and I'm guessing this is the only response we got to that objection?
It is.
All right. And we also, at our places, had copies of resolutions that were recently passed, I think, by the City of Wentzville and St. Charles County Council. Any questions about correspondence or comments? Are we going to send another objection?
Well, they already passed it, so.
Oh, geez. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's the 18th
I
of
mean,
June.
that was, the
Jeez.
letter actually said that they did it before the date they said they were going to do it.
Okay, then, no, I guess is the answer to that question. All right, so up next is our consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening is approval of our Board of Trustees meeting schedule for fiscal year '25, which starts July 1st, and then minutes from our May 17th meeting, our May 21st meeting, and our June 6th work session and closed meeting. If there are no requests to remove something from that consent agenda, I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. On the phone? Are they still with us? Okay, well, that motion passes. Up next is our formal agenda. We do have one item of unfinished business, item 24-22, the Sibley Sidewalk project, which includes a temporary construction easement and a right-of-way dedication.
Yeah, so we have with us today Dan Mann, who is the Director of Engineering, and Jonathan Swagman, who's Project Manager for the City of St. Charles. And I thank you for your patience. Who will be giving a presentation about this project and the requested easement and right-of-way dedication. So I will turn it over to the two of you. Oh, yeah, and you guys all have to turn around.
All right, good evening. Okay, great. I want to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I want to thank Jason and other members of library staff who have met with us in the past to discuss this issue. My name is Jonathan Swagman. I'm a project manager at the City of St. Charles. I'm here with Dan Mann, the Director of Engineering at the City of St. Charles. And I'm here to talk to you about the Sibley Sidewalks project and how it will be affecting the Catherine Linneman branch of the library. So I'll just give a quick little bit of background on the project itself. The project is a sidewalk project that we're building a new sidewalk along the east side of Sibley Street from Duchesne Drive down on the north end down to Lindenwood Avenue on the south end. This is about a 3,000-foot stretch of sidewalk. And we'll also be upgrading the pedestrian facilities in that area, the curb ramps, and making everything ADA compliant and compliant with the American with Disabilities Act. And also as part of that job, we will be implementing some traffic calming, which means things like curb bump outs and narrowing lanes so that we can encourage cars to drive slower. So basically this whole project is for improved pedestrian access and pedestrian safety. This is a map of the project. So this red line here is the project limits on the north end at Duchesne Drive, and the south end at Lindenwood Avenue. The Catherine Lindeman branch is located right here. So we're right on the north end here. So Sibley, Duchesne along the north side, and Elm Street runs along this side. This project is funded based on a 2020 TAP application which we received $640,000 of federal funding. So we put in an application to the federal government, and they have a pot of money set aside for these types of transportation alternative projects that don't involve cars, so things that improve pedestrians, cyclists, those types of things. So we received $640,000 of federal funding. The city is matching with funding of its own so that we can build this project. And that application that we submitted, a big part of it was that this is a corridor which has a lot of community resources on it. A big part is that the library is on this corridor, and we know this is an area that we have a lot of pedestrian use. People want to access the Catherine Lindeman Library. We have elementary schools down here, Lindenwood University over here, and all kinds of other foot traffic in this area. Because we receive federal funding, that means that we have to follow the federal project process, and so that we need to get right-of-way clearance before we can move forward with construction. So I'm here talking to you today about the right-of-way that we need so that we can move forward with this project, receive our construction funding obligation. And that is flipped for some reason, so it's a little hard to look at.
Really cool sidewalk.
But I'm gonna, just an idea, the construction is gonna be along the Sibley side of the library. So these pictures are kind of standing on the Sibley side entrance. So here we're looking to the south. You can see this sidewalk dead ends. And then to the north, we have existing sidewalk. We'll see if this next slide is a little better. Okay, this one's better. So this is kind of what we're going to replace it with. So going to the south, we'll put in new sidewalk, and this extends on down Sibley Street, of course. And then looking to the north, new sidewalk. It's basically going to be going in, because right now there is existing sidewalk running up to Duchesne. So it's basically going to go in, and as you can see, it'll be a bit wider. That's just to meet the current ADA standards. It'll be about a foot further in towards the library. So as you can see, not a huge change to what's existing, but it will really improve access to people living further down Sibley. This is kind of a bird's eye view of what exists and what will replace it. So this green strip here is the existing sidewalk, but it dead ends right here. This blue kind of underneath it is the new sidewalk. So as you can see, it's wider, and it will be, ADA compliant, correct cross slopes, all that kind of thing. What I'm here to talk to you about is the right-of-way and temporary construction easement that we're going to need. So right now, the library has easements that actually extend all the way out into the street. So this is kind of the curb line through here, and the library has easements all the way out into the street. We need new right-of-way and then temporary right-of-way on this backside. And I'll kind of get into what that means. We're asking for temporary construction easement along the Sibley side. This gives us access just during the life of the project. This gives us no future rights. And then we're asking for a right-of-way dedication for property from the street to about 1 foot behind the back of the sidewalk. So just that area from the street going back, that would become city property. But that is along Sibley and Duchesne and Elm. This is a bird's eye view of what we're talking about. This is that temporary easement on the Sibley side, and then this blue area all the way around is the permanent right-of-way on the Sibley, along Duchesne, and along Elm Street. So why is it that we need right-of-way? Why isn't this something that was taken care of beforehand? The property line for the Catherine Lindemann Library extends out into the roadway on all three sides, Sibley, Duchesne, and Elm Street. There is a city ordinance that's been in place for a long time, since 1985, that requires all roadways and adjacent sidewalks to be located on city right-of-way. Any property sales or redevelopments that happen require that the property come into compliance with this ordinance. There actually was a library redevelopment in this area in the mid-2000s, but for whatever reason, it was missed at that time. I kind of went back and looked at these redevelopment plans. There is reference to an easement through here, but when we dug further in on that easement, it's referencing a temporary easement that existed in the 90s. It doesn't actually kind of satisfy, anything as far as what the city would need or what the library would need going forward. Also, because this is extending out into the street, because it's covered in the sidewalk, this could open liabilities to the library in the event that there's an issue in the roadway or in the sidewalk in that area. This is kind of just another aerial view. This one has the satellite picture on. This is just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. So you can kind of see it extending out into the street here. And this is, again, the blue is the right-of-way dedication, and the green is the temporary construction easement. So this right-of-way will not extend into the parking lot, will not affect the building itself. The actual project, the Sibley Sidewalk project, is only going to be along the Sibley side, no construction along the Duchesne or Elm Street side. And then, this right-of-way dedication would relieve the library of any maintenance responsibilities or any other, potential issues that could crop up with that sidewalk. And then also it creates a clean title for the property. So right now we'd kind of consider that to be a bit of a dirty title, it extending out into the street. So if you ever want to redevelop that property, or you open a new branch, or whatever you decide to do in the future, this kind of cleans all that up. Otherwise, in the future, you'd have to go and fix this yourself. So the proposal is that the city is asking for the library to donate the temporary construction easement and the requested right-of-way. In exchange for that donation, the city will reconstruct the sidewalks in the entrance along the Sibley side, bringing it all up to ADA compliance. Also, we would widen the entrance on the Sibley Street side. So in conversations with library staff, we were told that sometimes there's issues with people trying to leave the library there. There's one lane coming in, there's one lane that goes out, and it can kind of back up. So we can reconstruct that entrance so that we have one lane coming in, and then a dedicated left turn lane going out and a dedicated right turn lane going out. So I think that could help kind of improve service in that area. And then additionally, like we said, we would be doing all the surveying, engineering work, drawing up the documents that would need to be done so that we could, get all this title cleaned up now. And when I was talking about widening that entrance, this is kind of a drawing that we put together, an engineering drawing that shows what that would look like. So right now there's only one lane. So we'd add this extra lane over here. We'd stripe it with arrows and kind of drew it up kind of like what it would look like. So right now the existing entrance is right here. We would widen it onto the Duchesne side. We'd add that third lane, and we'd have a wider entrance and kind of better access for everyone. So I know I kind of buzzed through all that stuff, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding this project or how it would affect the library. This project is, we expect to go out to construction in the fall, and we'd be building probably into the spring of next year.
Questions about the proposal?
Are there other places along Sibley Street that you have to get approval for this project?
We had to acquire at least temporary easements from 37 properties, and we've got 36 of them.
Are we the 37th?
You are.
Okay.
With respect to the temporary construction easement, will that impact access to the library during the construction of the project? Are you going to be working with library staff to kind of?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So
to handle
just
that?
like with anyone's driveway or any business, there may be a time where we have it down to one lane, maybe for like a week, because we probably have to build it half at a time. But during that time, we'd build the one half, then we'd build the other. During that time, it would be open, free to use, but it'll be a little inconvenient, people coming in and out, but you would have access. We wouldn't be cutting off access during construction.
Okay. Any other questions for the city staff? I don't have any additional questions. I think it's an important project. I would certainly not want to be responsible for the city of St. Charles losing its federal funding, so I just don't think that would be a good look. If no one has any questions, thank you very much for the presentation. That was very helpful for us to understand the full scope of the request. It looks like the recommendation from staff is for us to grant the temporary construction easement and also the right-of-way dedication along Sibley, Duchesne, and Elm Streets in exchange for the city widening the Sibley Street entrance at the parking lot there for the KO Library. If no one has any questions, I will accept a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
I'm happy to move that the Board of Trustees grant a temporary construction easement to the City of St. Charles in connection with the sidewalk widening project on Sibley Street, authorizing the CEO to sign the necessary documents to facilitate the right-of-way dedication along Sibley, Duchesne, and Elm Streets in exchange for the city widening the Sibley Street entrance drive to the library's parking lot at the city's expense.
Second.
We have a second and a motion and a second. Does anyone have any further questions, or is there anything else we'd like to discuss? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. And you all can exit stage left if you really want to, or you can continue while we talk about the rest of the items on our agenda. All right, we'll give them just a few minutes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, up next is new business. The first item of new business this evening is 24-32, which is Resolution 24-02 concerning the status of the May 17th proposal, the timeline, and upcoming community engagement. I can give a little background on this, and then we can have discussion. Just a second. Oh, I thought it was
very quiet. Please take your purchases to the.
All right, we have been receiving a lot of feedback from the community, and there's been a lot of anxiety and questions about what was going to happen with the May 17th proposal. And even though at a couple of our meetings we have expressed our commitment to not picking that proposal back up and considering other options, we had a suggestion from one of our trustees, and I'll let Matthew speak in a minute if he would like to, that we formalize that commitment in some way. So we have this resolution before us tonight to basically do that, to say that we have permanently tabled, it is not coming back, the May 17th proposal, and we will be taking steps to engage the public and get some feedback from them on any future options that we may consider. And just to clarify, the reason we're doing a resolution instead of picking back up the prior mode, it died. So it was tabled for 30 days. It's past 30 days. So in order to formalize this, we decided to put it in a resolution for the board's consideration. Matthew, did you want to add anything about the resolution specifically?
No, you summed it up pretty good. I just wanted to make sure there's a lot of questions out there from the public on that this item would be coming back up to the board, and I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we are moving past the May 17 proposal and moving on to other options. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. In talking with other trustees, I think that was something that we wanted to do for the public and just kind of hopefully gain some trust with the public that we're not planning on bringing this up within a 48-hour notice and trying to do something like previously. So I appreciate the opportunity to say some comments there, and I hope the board supports this.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or discussion points or comments about the resolution? And just to be clear, we can make edits to this before we adopt it if anyone has suggestions. Yeah, if we don't have any edits or any questions or discussion, I will accept a motion to adopt the resolution. Are we supposed to read this entire resolution into the, okay. Okay.
What she said?
Yeah, so when you make your motion, yeah, just read the title.
I make a motion that the board passes resolution number 24-02, resolution of the Board of Trustees of the St. Charles City County Library District regarding status of May 17th, 2024 proposal, timeline, and community engagement.
Okay.
I believe that was Matthew who seconded that. We have a motion and a second.
May I request a roll call vote on this?
Any objections? I have no objections. Sure. Any further questions or discussion before we take a vote? All right, we're going to take this vote by roll call. Robin, will you call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Richard is absent. That motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda is 24-33, approval of the fiscal year 2025 annual budget. Jason.
Okay, you have in front of you the proposed budget that reflects what we discussed at the work session a couple of weeks ago. We did incorporate the 7% increase for staff, as well as, we didn't talk about this at the work session, but it came up after that, increasing anyone who is not yet earning $15 an hour after that 7% increase to $15 an hour. Included with the memo is a chart that looks at, by job classification, this is after those actions are taken. So with the 7% increase and the elevation to $15 an hour, the number of staff in each classification that are less than the minimum, and of the new salary structure that has not yet been approved, but this would be kind of an eye toward being able to implement that structure, because we know we don't want to take any actions that would actually make it harder. So there would be 35% of the staff still under the minimum for what the new structure is. 49% between the minimum but below the midpoint, and I think that midpoint piece is a critical piece because that is what fully qualified or someone with moderate skills and experience in that a job equivalent to that grade should be earning. So really, those two categories alone, the majority of the staff would still be below that threshold. And then there would be 16% of the staff that would be above that threshold, but greater than the maximum. So that just gives you a snapshot of what the staffing in terms of the salaries would look like with.
Jason, just to clarify.
So no one above the,
there's no one above the maximum.
Above the maximum in each grade.
Yeah,
Okay.
Correct.
I think you said greater, but you meant below maximum.
Did I say greater?
Yeah.
I meant
So
below.
the percentages between midpoint, the 16% is midpoint to,
Up
to the maximum.
Yeah, below maximum. So there's no one even at the maximum.
Okay. That's
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
Of the new structure.
of the new structure
But there are people right now who
that are
at-
above max of our current structure.
Okay.
Yes. And then just because we're talking about salaries and staffing, sorry. Go
It's
ahead.
of the new structure with the 7%, but not the pay
And the 15.
and the 50. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's what is incorporated into the budget. I do just kind of, since we're talking about staffing, I know there is some confusion, and I just want to take this opportunity, since we're talking about it, to clarify that kind of when you look at our staff and who earns what, it's not necessarily what you would think. Just looking at sort of the highest paid folks in the organization, I mean, I'm obviously the highest paid, and then the chief administrative officer and the chief financial officer. But actually the fourth highest paid is a regional manager. The fifth is one of our directors. And then we have sort of a six-way tie for the sixth place, which someone in facilities, someone in IT, our longest tenured branch manager, and 3 assistant managers. So, and then another director, and then the last member of the C-suite, and then some folks in IT and branch managers. We actually have 8 librarians who don't have any management or supervisory responsibilities that earn more than branch managers do. So I think that's important to understand. You know, when I refer to the assistant managers, I mean, they're all earning more than their bosses are, one of which about $17,000 more than his boss. So I just want everyone to be cognizant of that and how they have gotten that way, I think, is a product looking back at past structures and things like that. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say about that. Julie, did you have anything else to add about the budget?
No.
Okay, so can I answer any questions? Now, actually, going on to that, did you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that struck me, and I'll let other trustees speak to this as well, when I saw the information that Jason put together for us on our various job classifications is, you know, when we're looking at giving just a simple across the board 7% to every position, irrespective of where those positions fall right now in our structure, I think we might want to take a more nuanced approach than that. And I think that it would be doing a disservice in a way to some of the staff to just do a blanket across the board. I know last year we did a complete across the board for everyone in an effort to just get us closer to where our salary structure update showed that we should be. In the 7% across the board that we directed staff to budget in at our work session was another attempt to just keep moving us towards getting closer to those competitive wages. But I think when looking at this chart and then hearing the information from Jason about, you know, it's not as simple as saying, oh, all the managers are the highest paid, so they shouldn't get any raises, or they should only get 1%. So making those kind of across the board blanket decisions about pay increases may not be the best way to do this. So one of the questions I had asked Jason in advance of this meeting was, can we take a more nuanced approach? Can we pass a budget that does not include pay increases to give staff the opportunity? Sorry. Can we mute that in this room?
I mean, you can pull
Okay.
the wire.
Well, everyone has 5 minutes to get their books to check out. So that we can give staff a little bit more time, and then they could bring back to us some options for maybe implementing pay increases that aren't just straight across the board. That is an option, and I just wanted to make everyone aware of that option. I know there have been questions about whether doing just a blanket 7% or a blanket any percent really is the best approach. So I did want to make all the trustees aware that we don't have to do that. We can pass the budget without a salary increase built into it tonight, and then amend the budget, let's say in July, after considering some options for how to give a pay increase that makes a little bit more sense, I think. Sure.
Actually, if I can add real quick, I would say, you know, it wasn't just last year we did the across the board. I mean, the history of this organization, it's always been an across the board. So, quite honestly, it's one of the things that I've always kind of thought contributed kind of to part of the operating cost piece. So, I mean, it has a long history, but I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think a more nuanced approach is, I mean, a much more equitable way. And really looking at, and I mean, just throwing some possibilities out there is looking at, I don't know if it's quartiles or halves or whatever of where people fall in the range, and then the increase would be greater for those lower in the range than it is for those upper in the range.
So basically, if we had a certain group of staff who were well below the midpoint,
right,
we would give them a different percentage increase than people who are,
higher
say,
than
at the maximum of their particular
right,
classification,
or even
something
higher
like
than
that.
the midpoint. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would we use the amount of money that was going to be the 7% across the board and use that as the amount, the total amount, and then redistribute that more equitably, but that would be the amount, so it's actually kind of baked into the total budget, the amount would be? Or do we just want to wait and see what it turns out to? I mean, maybe that's a good way to use as the beginning point, since that amount is already known.
I think we could do it either way. I think the tricky part is going to be, you know, that 7%, it affects other things than salary. I mean, it affects all the benefits, pension, and so if we have a total dollar that was based on everyone getting a 7%, and then at the end of the analysis, you know, somebody's getting a 3, but somebody's getting a 10, or however that shakes out, then those other numbers that are tied to salary will also be changed. So we might have to be amending the budget anyway.
But I think this is a good proposal.
Yeah.
This is what I had talked to some board members about, and I think this is good.
Yeah, I do think in future years, that is a good approach, though, just arriving at a dollar figure for salary increases. And that is what my experience has always been in other jobs. And then it's up to us as administration to go and allocate those dollars. But, you know, the board doesn't get in on the specific increases given. But I think in this case, because it's the first time, we don't have that experience to fall back on. To know. So we really need to go look at it and come back. But, I mean, we can certainly kind of use that for our own internal basis, though, kind of as a starting point. Yeah.
What struck me looking at this is even doing the 7%, we still have 35% of our staff that's below the minimum.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's unacceptable. I mean, in the future, I think our goal in the future should probably be to look at all these people that are below the minimum and get them all to at least the minimum, and then also try and see where everybody falls in the midpoint. I think that's something that takes time, and that probably is a more nuanced approach going forward. But I also think we have to do something, because otherwise it just gets more and more out of alignment overtime. So, I think we talked about the 5% and the 7% in our work session. I think we kind of all talked about the 7%. But what I would like to see going forward is anybody who falls in this minimum, the 35%, that we really work in the future to get them to at least the minimum.
Yeah.
So.
So I will say too, and I don't disagree with you, like, short of fully implementing the structure and putting every individual where they should fall on it, that's the ideal solution. But short of that, there's going to have to be a compromise made. And the big compromise there is by elevating minimums, you're going to have drastic salary compression then.
Right.
So you're going to have people, and actually Lynn might have some examples. I do. Like real life from our staff examples of if we brought someone up to minimum, what?
Yeah, for example, some library assistant ones, there's an employee with 9+ years of experience with a 7% raise that would get them to $15.18. So, you've got someone with 9 years, but then they have to work next to the person who's walking in the door and they make 18 cents more than them. LA2s, the proposed min would be $23.86, 7%, they'd be at $24.16. They have nearly 11 years of experience. So then you have a new employee again walking in and they make 30 cents more than that. So it's just going to be a real issue to kind of deal with, and I think hard for some employees to accept that I've been here 11 years and this person walking in, I'm making 30 cents more than that individual.
Yeah. Is there a way for us to have both things? I mean, do this in a way that we are not introducing this significant compression issue while also being cognizant of the fact that we have so many people that are well underpaid.
I would like there to be, but I don't know that there is. Not if you want to address it quickly, or you could just slowly walk everybody up, but that's going to take years and years and years, and it'll get further and further behind. So again, that's why the cost of implementing the new structure was so significant, is because it avoided it by moving everyone where they should be.
So is
you can
there an
mitigate
option
it in some ways,
to, I'm just going to use your example of the library associate who would only be making 15, 18, and the new person makes 15. Can we move both? So the new person is, but we make sure the existing employee is moved enough so that they're not only making 18 cents more than a new. It's a lot more complicated, I understand.
So that's basically kind of what I said. If you
Yeah.
divide into quartiles, say, and give the lowest, I'm just throwing numbers out, 10%, the next up, 6%, or something like that. So they're not getting as much. So yes, but again, there's all kinds of ways. We don't know exactly what that would look like in terms of costs, because it will vary part-time,
Yes.
full-time. It's so, yeah.
Does implementing the 7% make this disparity better or worse?
This is reflecting
That
the
is
7%.
the 7%.
No, I know, but
Well, it
for
stays
what-
exactly the same because everyone moves up the same.
Okay. So the disparity is just continued?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it increases the disparity, because it gives the person who's making $18,000 more than their boss is gonna make even more than their
7%,
boss.
yeah, that's
Right.
true.
Yeah.
Good point.
So I think it makes the disparity worse. Yeah.
Is, just to get is everyone in favor of this more nuanced approach and asking the staff to come up with some options for us to consider at the July meeting? Obviously, we don't want to take the next 6 months to figure this out, right? So, it's important to get it squared away quickly. so that we can have, because if we approve those in July, I think original game plan was the salary increases to go into effect in August, and they could still go into effect in August if we approve them in July, or would it just, I guess maybe September or something like that?
Yeah, it might have to go a little longer.
Okay.
Or just approve some overtime for that department.
Yes. So speaking from a practical standpoint, do we need to bound this in some way? I know Buddy mentioned before, looking at what the total dollar was at the 7% that's already budgeted, plus the bringing everyone up to 15. Do we need to use that as a guidepost or a ceiling? Because obviously we have a fixed amount of revenue. So we can't be doing all this and then suddenly we are operating in a deficit, right?
It has
So
to be a ceiling, because we only approved up to that, we approved that 7%. So I think the number, whatever that number is, has to be the ceiling, because then you'd have to do it completely different.
could we, well, if we approve the budget with the 7% dollar amount and the other incremental changes for benefits, is that going to be insufficient to do the other thing we've asked you to do, which is a nuanced approach and addressing the people who are less than minimum, trying to address the compression issue? I mean, I think it needs to be bounded in some way, but I also don't know that just approving the 7% dollar amount is sufficient. We might run out of money, I guess is what I'm saying.
It's hard to answer that.
Sorry.
I mean,
Why don't we just
I mean, if we're given
pass
a
the budget within and then we'll amend it within the next 2 months to reflect proposals from the staff regarding the equitable pay increases.
And just try to
Because
stay
that
close.
number may be, because we may get it back and we may have to argue about, or not argue, discuss what that amount is. So I would think we left it with the clear understanding that if you come back and it's like 12%, then no.
Mhm.
I was saying just 7% maybe just is your guidepost, but maybe we shouldn't bake it in, because maybe he comes up with a way to do it for 6%.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that before we talk about other aspects of the budget? Did you have anything else you wanted to talk? I know that was the big thing hanging out there, was that.
no.
I mean, I will say, most of everything that is in, not most, everything that's in this proposal, we've seen at various other meetings, and we also discussed at the work session. And so there isn't new information. The new piece of information was related specifically to salary increases. And so I think what it sounds like we're going to do at this point, and then again, I'll ask for any questions or other discussion, is approve the budget without the salary increase. Staff will come up with some proposals for how to address a more nuanced approach to salary increase, keeping the 7% in mind. And then in July, we will consider an amendment to the budget to implement a salary increase. Is that the best way to do this?
Yeah, that might be a Julie question, because part of me looks at this and goes, okay, well, our salary and benefits amount is $14,312,910, so just keep it at that, but say don't implement any of the increases, and we'll try and hit that. I mean, I don't know. I'm talking. What's the easiest thing to do here?
I don't know. It's like I don't approach things this way, so I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me to do. So you're going to have to explain that to me, Jason, because I've heard a number of things batted around, but I don't know what you're asking.
We are not factoring in the salary increases.
So do you
in
want
the way that
this budget as presented, is this what you're going to adopt right now, or when you're saying that you're adopting something without salary increases, this has increases. What does that mean?
So I guess the question for you, Julie, is it easier, or does it make more sense for us to adopt the budget as is with the understanding that you're not going to implement any salary increases until we hear the nuanced proposal and we amend the budget to reflect whatever it is we agree to? Or is it easier to say, okay, this budget without salary increases in it?
The first.
Okay.
Just adopt it and then we'll amend it because obviously, yeah, those decisions haven't been made.
Okay. I think that sounds reasonable to me. Does Matthew or Renee have any questions about what we've been discussing with respect to salary increases or the approach?
I fully support doing zero increase and then amend it. But I couldn't hear what the last answer was on which was the right method to move forward.
Yeah, I couldn't either.
So Julie is recommending that we adopt the budget as is with the directive to staff that salary increases will not be implemented at this time. And then when staff has the proposals for how to implement the increases in a different way, we'll amend the budget in July to reflect whichever proposal the board accepts.
I can't support the budget that methodology, so I would prefer to amend it and say 0% increase. But if that's not the way that the board wants to move forward, I won't be voting for the 7% increase.
I thought, Julie, you were saying approve the budget with the 0% increase, and then if we amend it later to include an increase. Or did I misunderstand you?
Currently, this budget reflects a 7% increase and then the elevation to the $15 if that's not met for the employee. So I was saying it can be adopted as is with the directive that we not actually do an increase in August, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then instead, it's like amend the budget once you've developed what the plan's supposed to be, what that's supposed to look like.
Okay.
Would that allow us, if we didn't like the proposals in July, would that allow us to amend it and take the 7% back out?
Yes, you can amend it more than one time, and
Okay.
that's correct.
Renee, did you have any questions?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So I think in terms of what we're going to consider for the motion this evening with respect to the budget is to approve it as presented with the directive to staff that salary increases will not be implemented, and staff will bring us some proposals for taking a more nuanced approach to increases to address the staff who are under minimum and hopefully mitigate any compression issues. And then we will amend the budget in July to reflect whichever proposal the board adopts. So if there isn't any more questions about anything in the budget, I know we've been focusing on the salary piece, but if someone has a question or suggestion about anything else that's in the budget, let me speak now.
I would just like to make one quick comment. I think what some people call compression, other people might just call income equality.
All right, so if there are no further questions or comments on the budget, I will accept a motion to approve the budget as presented with the directive that we are not going to implement salary increases until we amend the budget.
I'm happy to make that motion. Do I need to state it specifically like that?
No.
Yep, so I move, do we have any official language here? I move that we approve the annual budget for fiscal year 2025 as presented, with the understanding that the salary increase will not be implemented, that we're going to take some extra time to get some different options from staff as to how we might be able to make salary increases more equitable.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions or further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
No.
I'm sorry, Buddy, were you a no? And Matthew was a no? All right. That motion passes. All right, next item on our agenda is 24-34 FY 2024 budget adjustments.
So I'm just requesting the presented 4 different adjustments that you're seeing on the memo. The first 2 relate to the per capita state aid and the non-resident professional athletes and entertainers tax. We did not originally include those amounts in the budget, so I wanted to amend at this time so that year to year it looks more normalized. And then the third and the fourth, as far as the transfers between the supply accounts, service contracts, and then the rent and the lease. Our supplies, we've actually become much more efficient in our purchasing this year. So I would like to reallocate that amount to the other areas that are a little bit over. The rent and lease are over because of our Mid-Rivers Mall lease that we did not originally plan on. So I'm requesting that the board approve the fiscal 2024 budget adjustments as presented.
Are there any questions for Julie on the adjustments?
Did we decide to deduct funds from the supplies budget because supplies funding wasn't being used to the amount that it was budgeted for, or?
Correct. We have some savings in that area.
Thanks.
Any other questions? If not, I will accept a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget adjustments as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. The last item of new business is 24-35, Resolution 24-03, resolution to appropriate funds for capital projects.
Oh, this is from me, isn't it? This just officially appropriates the 4.3 million in capital projects that are included in the budget that you just approved.
Any questions for Jason on the capital projects or the resolution to commit funds for our capital projects?
I would just encourage us as a board going forward into the future to be a little more careful about how we're allocating funds into the capital pot as opposed to the operating expenditures pot. I realize a lot of these expenses are baked in because we've signed contracts and things are underway and everything, but just my 2 cents.
Remind us, Jason, some of these capital projects are carryover, is that correct? Or are these
Or what?
carryover from prior fiscal years?
Yeah, I mean, the most significant piece is the Mittendorf Canal renovation that the board voted to approve.
Yep.
We already contracted, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, just a reminder that we always bring this to the board to view several times in the months leading up to the budget.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for the board to provide that feedback.
And I would also just say that not putting money in the capital fund does not free up money for operating expenses. Again, I'm just going to keep saying that. Any other questions? Matthew or Renee, do you have questions or comments?
Nope. I make a motion to approve the resolution number 2403, appropriating funds for capital projects.
I second it.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. The next item on our agenda is a closed meeting. We will need a motion for going into closed session, and we will make that vote by roll call.
That's you, Rob. Roll call.
Well, someone needs to make
Oh,
a
sorry.
motion first.
Someone needs to make the motion.
I'll make a motion, we go into closed session pursuant to Missouri statute 610-021, 1, legal actions, 2, real estate, 3, personnel.
I second it.
I second.
Second and
Delay
third.
gets us every time.
Sorry.
Yes.
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 We're staying here.